Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. This is Screen Watching. My name is Dan Barrett, joined by Simon Foster. Simon, how the heck are you?
I'm doing all right, Daniel Barrett. I'm doing very well. In fact, good to see you. Good to have all the screen watchers on board. What are we talking about this week?
Well, Simon, can I just start the conversation this week? I want to talk to you about love.
Oh, I am. No, I was going to say I'm an expert on that. No, I'm not, but I'm happy to weigh in on the concept of love.
So here's the thing. Think about the true loves of your life. And I'm not talking about the love for, your wife or your children. I'm talking about something more meaningful than that. I'm talking about the love of the screen, of television, of movies.
Yep.
So look, we've all loved and lost. I think that's probably fair to say. Yeah. Sometimes, the loves of our lives just go away. Not everything can be The Simpsons. Sometimes The Simpsons just comes and disappoints you, which is another type of love and betrayal, but that's neither here nor there. What I'm thinking about, Simon, and I was reminded this last night, I was watching the first ever episode of Mad Men.
Yes. Okay. Sure.
Through my life, I've had a couple of really great TV loves. And I don't think I've loved as hard and as fiercely as I have a TV show since Mad Men. Like, that was just seeing the final episode of that and then realizing that sort of crippling ennui that took place afterwards, where I didn't understand where I was in the world anymore. I didn't understand what the world has for me. And I'll be honest, nothing's really quite filled the gap in the exact same way. So the closest I get is maybe The Good Wife, which led into The Good Fight. And both of those come very close to what Mad Men had to offer me in terms of filling that, real drive in my sort of spiritual sense of self. That is degrees away from it. But Simon, here's the thing. The Good Fight finishes up in just a couple of months' time. And then after that, I don't know that I've really got anything that really quite touches the spot as much as that show does. There's Evil by the same show. That's around. I like that quite a lot. It doesn't quite touch me in the exact same way as these Good Wife, Good Fight series have. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'm starting to, I'm looking into a void, a dark chasm right now.
I know exactly what you're saying, because as a film lover and someone who craves that connection with the screen that I've only had a few times in my life, it's why I keep going back to the movies. A lot of people say to me,
chasing the high.
Yeah, exactly. I'm chasing the high. A lot of people say to me, oh, you just want to hate movies. And it's exactly the opposite. I go into every film wanting to give it 5 out of 5. I go into every film wanting to have some kind of life-changing experience and dial it back as the film becomes apparent to me. But life-changing moments at the cinema, clearly for my generation, it was Star Wars and Close Encounters. I fell in love with the New Zealand film Wild Rider. That's one of the films that I can completely understand what you're saying about Mad Men. You just have that connection to it. So we're facing a Dan Barrett who's going to be half the man he might otherwise be with The Good Wife disappearing from our screens.
Well, Good Fight, which is the sequel series to Good Wife, but that's quibbling. Yeah. So look, I don't know. I'm just feeling a little bit dark and bleak about it. It's been weighing on my mind a bit last couple of weeks. And last night I was watching Mad Men, it just kind of reminded me exactly what it was that I was feeling.
And that's why we do what we do, Dan. That's why we're here and trying to sort of make sense of this crazy little thing called love.
Yeah, this is it. I looked around, I looked through the lounge room and I looked into the eyes of my adorable little baby. I looked into the eyes of my wife and I thought, I really need love in my life from somewhere.
Well, I tell you what we should do. We should start the review segment and shit on something.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
It's not like TV, only better.
Television, teacher, mother.
Secret lover. That's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for it.
So right at the top of the podcast, I did mention this is Screen Watching. I mentioned my name, which is Dan Barrett. I'm sure you remember. I mentioned Simon Foster, also with me.
Hello.
Now, here's the thing. It doesn't really help the sense of ennui that I'm feeling when I look around and I think about what TV has to offer me over the next couple of weeks. And there's a couple of interesting things on the horizon, but there's a bit of choppy waters till I get to there. So at the moment, you grab around and grab what you can. Because you may remember, Simon, in the 2 months leading into June, which was the Emmys nomination cutoff date,
fond of memories.
It was so much TV and it kind of feels like it was just all shoved there. And then as soon as that, it's been tumbleweeds more or less since. And look, this week on the show, I'll be talking about, I love that view on Paramount Plus. And also, I'm going to talk about the new Channel 10 reality hit series, Hunted.
Oh boy, I don't like where this is going. I've got 2 films this week, both of which the industry has fairly high hopes for, certainly here in Australia. One's called Where the Crawdads Sing, and the other one's called The Black Phone. I'm going to put the industry right in its place.
Yeah, take that, industry. Okay, let's play a sting. We're going to get into something.
It stinks.
Okay, Simon, do you want to kick it off? Do you want to start with Where the Crawdads Sing?
I do. Let's play the clip.
In town, they tell the story of the marsh girl, the one who grew up alone in the wild. But they never really knew me. Like most stories, the facts don't weigh into it.
So Where the Crawdads Sing is a fairly big deal bit of IP with its target YA audience, young adult audience, who made Delia Owens' novel a bestseller. Sony Pictures are counting at the very least that audience comes along to see director Olivia Newman's adaptation, which I guess seems a safe bet in these trying times. But any hope that this somewhat disjointed, fairly unexciting film becomes the next romantic drama generational touchstone like The Notebook did, that seems very unlikely. The it girl of the moment, Daisy Edgar Jones, she plays Kaya, who raised herself to adulthood in the dangerous marshlands of North Carolina after literally her whole family abandons her in some extraordinary scenes. For years, rumors of the marsh girl haunted Barkley Cove, isolating Kaya from her community. Drawn to 2 young men from town, Kaya opens herself to a new and kind of startling world, but when one of them is found dead, she is immediately cast by the community as the main suspect. And as the case unfolds, the verdict as to what actually happened becomes increasingly unclear, somewhat murky, and it threatens to reveal the many secrets that lay within the marsh, or as I called this film, Dawson's Marsh. The key elements here are romance, as in the blossoming of a young woman, the murder mystery in which the great David Strathairn's small-town lawyer builds a defense for Kaya, and the role of destiny and memory in our lives. But Olivia Newman, the director, and producer Reese Witherspoon, they never find a cohesive balance in this film. There is little that seems authentic about Kaya's life alone on the swamp, and the way the investigation and the legalities of the court case unfolds, I mean, it's pretty daft, let's just be honest. And while it might endear her to fans of the book as the big screen version of Kaya, there's nothing about Daisy Edgar Jones' performance or the film in general that suggests this will be the breakout film that she was clearly hoping it would be. And the big twist reveal at the end, which apparently plays to gasps and incredulity to people who read the book, it absolutely tests credibility to breaking point. To pull off such a mammoth bait and switch, you've got to have the audience in the palm of your hands, where the Crawdads Sing never, ever does. Such a disappointment, this film, and very bland looking as well. I think they could have got a better cinematographer to work over some of this amazing countryside. So Where the Crawdads Sing is in wider release, may become kind of a slumber party favorite for a generation going forward, but I think that's about all this one can hope for.
May I ask you a question? I hope you don't think me daft for asking it.
Sure.
So I'm a grown man. I'm an adult. I've got a university degree. What is a marsh?
A marsh. Well, so you've got your marsh and you've got your swamp, and then you've got your bayou, and then you've got your levee. And I don't want to go into too much depth with regard to that, but a marsh.
Shame you haven't gone into depth on any of that, but go on.
So, well, a marsh is kind of like a swamp. You know, it's a muddy, murky area, kind of like an enclosed area.
Is this the kind of place where I'd dump a dead body to start some sort of Nordic noir?
Or dump a dead movie? Yes, that's exactly what you do. You'd start. This is good body dumping territory. Despite that, they stumble across the dead body in this film as if it's sort of just anywhere in the main street somewhere, when it's not. It's right out in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, there's a lot of very sort of plotting twists, and without giving away the ending for those who haven't read the book, no, I'm not going to say anything, because it really does spin the film in another direction, one which is quite unbelievable and very disappointing. So Where the Crawdads Sing is for fans of the book only.
Marsh. Simon, I'm going to go on. I'm going to talk to you about the new comedy series from Paramount Plus. It's called I Love That For You.
My dream was always to be a host on SVN. Of course, I would not do anything without discussing it with you first.
We've been on like 2 dates.
3.
Who is this person?
I hail from Cleveland, and if y'all are looking for a real good friend, you know who to call. Yeah.
Joanna
Move her down to 3 a.m.
3 a.m. Yeah, I agree.
Forgot about that little bit. Here we go. Joanna Gold, she's a 40-ish-year-old cancer survivor. She had leukemia as a teenager, which completely derailed her life. It's interrupted her schooling and social life, and now she's working for her dad at Costco. She's living in the family home with her parents. But good news, she does have her own entrance to the house, and there's a really nice table and chair outside that she can call her own. And she's had trouble creating social connections. As the show opens, she feels alone and aimless. But she hasn't felt completely alone through her life. While she doesn't have any real-life friends, she has found companionship since her time in hospital through the home shopping network SVN. An opportunity comes up in the way that these things happen in TV shows to audition for a role on air with SVN, and she gets the gig, improbably. Now, the socially awkward, excitable Joanna Gold, she's set to fulfill a lifelong dream while working alongside SVN presenters who she's been watching for her entire life. But when she flames out during her first on-air block, she's about to get fired by the ruthless network chief. However, Joanna's got a Hail Mary pass that she can trade in. She tells everyone she's currently fighting cancer. Now, everyone in a very toxic workplace that is SVN, they start supporting Joanna. They do all they can to take advantage of her and her cancer narrative. But there's also the occasional one of them which try to work out where they sit now in the changed political hierarchy of SVN. So it's all very much about self-interest. Now, the challenge with a TV show, the self-interest for you, the viewer, the challenge with the show is that Vanessa Bayer, she's the star of the show, she's in a lead role, and that SNL star, former SNL star, she may still be on, I don't really know. She's built up a fan following through the years, and usually she plays high-strung, slightly unbalanced supporting and guest role characters in pretty much every movie and TV comedy that you've seen over the last 10 years. Now, look, I think she's great, but she's very much front and center in this show, and she proves to be a lot. Like, it is a lot of that. Now, some viewers will be fine with her. I was mostly okay with her, but others will find it a bit too grating. She's very funny, but very hard to watch as well. So look, personally, I'm really fascinated by the home shopping network aspect of this. I'm interested in home shopping networks. I'm interested in how they function. So I was so drawn to this program. Now, it's fascinating to watch these 24/7 shopping networks as you see the highly skilled presenters fill full half-hour to hour-long blocks with really friendly and engaging content, but they're also only there to sell stuff to the audience. But the presenters, they're trusted friends for a lot of the viewers. They fulfill a lot of the similar functions of AM talkback radio hosts. They become friends to those who need them. Now, I Love You for That also offers an insight into how these networks function in terms of how sales are connected to that on-air presentation. So that being super, super friendly, but there's a sales push behind all of it. So as viewers, we see the relationship between the on-air content and the sales, with the hosts and everyone else in the building able to see a real-time graph laid over the top of the SVN broadcast signal. If sales go up, hosts are encouraged to stay on that same topic, vibe of conversation. If sales go down, the hosts change conversation and look for a new way into it. That's how it works in real life. And I've never actually seen that shown on TV before, but they do that here, which is super fascinating. Now, I Love You for That. It's a good investment of your time. Vanessa Bayer, she proves in this that she's got what it takes to lead a series, even if perhaps in her next role, maybe they just need to be a bit more chill in what she's doing. In the show, though, she's surrounded by a really solid supporting cast. Notably, you got Molly Shannon, who's fantastic in this as a seasoned performer who she's celebrating her 30th year on air with SVN, and she had played a pivotal role in bringing Joanna joy when she was a child. The series is 8 episodes long. It's a bit inconsistent in tone and quality overall, but there's probably enough here to like more than things that you won't like about it. And as I said, there's a little bit of behind the scenes of something we're all pretty familiar with, but we've seen very little of. This is good, funny, interesting TV, and I love You for that. All 8 episodes streaming now on Paramount Plus.
Very nice comment there. Well done. Yeah, look, I agree with your comments about Vanessa Bayer. She can be very funny and has been very funny on SNL and in the support part. She turns up everywhere playing, you know, the best friend or the girl next door, or those sort of roles that someone like Judy Greer does, you know, to a perfect degree. Yes, I'm keen to see if she can pull together a lead role in a TV series, because she does have this very elevated personality, this very sort of animated style, which doesn't always ring true, but which often rings funny. So yeah, I'm keen to see how that happens. The other big plus for me for a man of my age and generation is Bess Armstrong in the support cast, who for years, she was in that sort of 80s it girl period where she was in High Road to China, Jaws 3. You put her alongside people like Bonnie Bedelia, the wife in Die Hard, or Mary Steenburgen as being of that period and having a real sort of moment for a little while. So I can't wait to see Bess Armstrong back in the screens. And Molly Shannon's always very funny. So yeah, I'm excited.
So yeah, Bess Armstrong plays the mother in the show, and the person I'm kind of interested in is the guy that plays the father. Is this guy named Matt Malloy, who people know from Mad Men, just to bring it back around. There was a great season where he played one of Don Draper's neighbors who got involved in his shenanigans, particularly when Don Draper started sleeping with his wife. The
Matt Malloy, who was also on Seinfeld as Lloyd Braun with the chewing gum?
No, that's not Matt Malloy. That is, I think his name's Matt McCoy.
Is it?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, with the Serenity Nows.
Yes.
Also, if it is Matt McCoy, which I'm pretty sure that's his surname, he was also the guy that ended up replacing the Steve Guttenberg role within the Police Academy movies.
In the Police Academy films. That's a lot of gum.
Matt McCoy.
Is it just me or is that a lot of gum? It's a lot of gum. All right. So that is, what's it called? I Love That For You on Paramount. I'm looking forward to that. I'll check that out. I like that. So I got to get a bit of a scare at the movies when I saw The Black Phone.
You goof. Wasn't that just peachy keen?
You need some help?
You see that? Yeah. Would you hand me my hat? Yes, sir. I am a part-time magician.
Are those black balloons in there?
Would you like to see a magic trick?
The terrific Mason Thames plays Finney, a shy but clever 13-year-old boy who becomes the latest victim of the Grabber, a sadistic killer who abducts kids, keeps them in a soundproof basement, and bides his time before the inevitable. When a disconnected phone on the wall, the black phone of the title, funnily enough, begins to ring, Finney discovers that he can hear the voices of the killer's previous victims, each of whom gives him clues that may save him. All while this is going on, Finney's younger sister, Gwen, the equally terrific Madeline McGraw, is getting psychic clues in her dreams to her brother's hiding place. Perhaps the best Stephen King film that Stephen King had zero to do with. Aussie director Scott Derrickson's latest Chiller wears its influences very clearly on its grubby sleeve. There is a lot of the DNA of it in this story. The melding of those grungy 70s blacks and browns in the look of the film, the mortal threat to kids, which recalls King classics like Cujo and The Shining, the children themselves and the connection they have to the supernatural world. It mostly comes together in a satisfyingly creepy package, a bit light on logic at times, but offering up a handful of legitimately jump in your seat scares. The two lead kids aside, and they are great, the film's big asset is Ethan Hawke hamming it up as the kid killer, the Grabber. He leaves nothing on the acting table as the silver mask wearing bad guy. And the mask is never fully explained, though it does mean any actor can pick up the role in the inevitable sequels. Derrickson and Hawke, they made the Sinister films together, and they seem to know how to make being scared both deeply unpleasant and great fun. So The Black Phone is in general release.
This is a film which I'm really quite keen to see, but it's not that I'm so keen to see it that I'll rush out to the cinema to see it. So I think it's really a matter of it'll turn up on TV at some point, but I kind of feel that even once it turns up on TV, it'll probably take me a while to want to press play on it because there's no great like lure to it. Like it seems like it'll be good because Ethan Hawke's in it and I get this good vibe off it, but I'm not rushing to it on any platform.
The big plus, I think, is the 70s setting because it takes a whole lot of technology out of the police investigation, the options the kid has to escape, why they don't spot this creepy van and this guy driving around the small town like all the time who, you know, in this day and age, you would just point at and say, abductor. But the look, the way they create the 70s is terrific. Also in there is Jeremy Davies, who many remember from a run of indie films in the 90s. He was in Saving Private Ryan.
Secretary,
exactly. Secretary, yes, he wasn't.
Yeah, people are known from Lost.
Yeah.
He was in that for a few seasons.
Yeah, and he plays the alcoholic father of Finney and Gwen, and he is almost as unhinged as the killer himself. So yeah, look, there's plenty to recommend this. I think you're right. I don't think this is the sort of film that's going to change anyone's life if they wait till it pops up on one of the streaming platforms. But make sure you turn out all the lights and turn it up loud, and you'll get a good scare.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like there's more to this. I got nothing.
No, that's fine. There's not a whole lot to talk about. My review sort of suggested it does what it does, and it does very well.
Sorry, I actually did have a thought. I just don't remember what my thought was, and just sort of trying to paste over that a bit. So you mentioned that it's set in the 70s, and that's for the obvious reason where you need to divorce it from technology a little bit.
Sure.
But here's a question for you, and it's not really one that we can answer. I'm really just putting it out as the ether, which is that you're the age you are. I'm a little bit younger, but like I'm on the cusp of remembering life pre-internet, and I've got a good chunk of my 20s where we didn't really carry around like smartphones in our pockets. I did have a smartphone pretty early in, but like you've got to think 2007, the iPhone is when that really goes mainstream.
Sure.
So anyone who's like been from like say 16 years old in 2007 onwards, like that's a concern. But you have to think there's an entire generation of people who they grow up and they see something like this, and there's probably a big divorce from them, like a disconnect that exists from what they perceive as being their real life to what's being presented on screen. And I understand the mechanics as to why they've stripped away that internet connectivity issue entirely. But for this younger audience, for whom horror is really the intended target, like horror is for teenagers to be watching, do they feel such a disconnect from this world that has no connectivity to it that it actually takes away something from the horror of it all? Again, I don't think you've got an answer for it. But
no, exactly. I guess my only comment to that would be that would also take out of the mix any movie made before 2000 when the internet...
Here's the thing. So I think about like my relationship to older cinema.
Yeah.
Okay. And like I wasn't around in the 70s, but when I watched a movie from the 70s, I can contextualize it within the 70s. But I excuse that to a certain degree because, it was made in the 70s. Like there's no time travel involved. We can't fix that. But for a movie that's made in 2021, 2022, which is set in the 70s only for the mere purpose of getting around that technological issue, is that actually a disservice to the audience is the question I'm asking. Again, you can't.
I think there's a quaintness. No, but I guess my answer would be I think there's a quaintness. I think there's an interest in amongst the to a certain extent your generation and younger than me generation that look at these films of the 80s and 90s and imagine a high school without the influence of the smartphone or the iPhone, or look at a police procedural from that period who can watch Silence of the Lambs and not be drawn on the fact that, oh, well, why didn't they just make a phone call? Oh, gee, if she just had her phone or something like that. So I think there is a simplicity in hindsight now, watching these films nowadays that, and that these films sort of put over and films of an older put over the new generation can look into and see them for the storytelling they are. I don't think modern audiences need to have modern, I guess, ideals and technology as part of their stories to make the stories worthwhile to them.
Yeah, look, I don't know. I just wonder if there's like because the thing with horror is that there's something which is very guttural about it. Like if you think about like the things that scare you, you can never really necessarily articulate exactly what they are, but it's something which is sort of deep within you that you're having a reaction to. And I just wonder, because horror is so specifically for teenagers to watch. Like, I'm not saying it's only for teenagers, but like that's kind of the people that get along to horror films en masse. Like that's really the audience for a horror film.
But
and
isn't one of the great cliches of the modern horror film is when one of the kids in the group will hold their phone up and go, no bars, no reception.
Yeah, that stuff's awful.
Yeah, well, but that's what they do to tell horror stories nowadays. So there isn't the easy way out that the modern technology provides.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, are we actually scaring the kids in the right way?
I say scare them any way we can. They need it.
Like maybe we should be scaring them with their phones in their pocket. Is there a way to do this? We've got to find out. But anyway, Simon, I'm going to move on to talk about technology in another way. I'm going to talk about the brand new Australian hit reality smash. It's called Hunted Australia.
Just picked up 2 black vans on the Balti Bridge.
Both vehicles are pulling into Fed Square. Wait out. Stand by for a release. Here we go. Eyes to the big screen.
Boy, does this show suck. Sorry, look, I try not to review things that aren't really worth spotlighting. So there's a lot of really good TV around the place, and it's always a joy to focus on the good things around. Like, I want to be positive where we can, and there's so much you can be positive about. It is plentiful. There's very rarely a need anymore to actually focus on a turkey if you want to avoid it. And the conceit of the show, it's actually pretty interesting. It's got several groups of people dropped off at the same central point in a city. In this instance, it's the Federation Square in Melbourne. Each group are given a few $100s in cash and a couple of extra 100 in an FPOS card. And then they have to evade people chasing after them. They've got to evade being caught for a full month. The people who are on the run, they're called the hunted. But then you've also got the hunters, which are a collection of law enforcement officials who use surveillance videos, online searches, financial tracking, and other tools available to them to locate the hunted people. And the series premise, it's a good reminder of how difficult it is in a modern age to actually properly go underground. The problem for the show is the same problem that stops me watching almost every reality show. It strips away all the reality and humanity from the program. I don't recall the UK or US versions of the show being as overproduced as the Australian one is, but this series layers in a really compelling idea with an overload of graphics and over-the-top acting from the hunters who are all fake acting their way through the idea that this is an actual thing that happens every day versus what it actually is, which is a reality show and they're performing for a camera. It's basically a really silly, distracting artifice. The opening minutes of the show have the hunters narrating the vans dropping off the contestants, as though they don't know where they're going to be dropped off and as though this isn't a show. Like, it just feels dumb from the outset. Okay, it's kind of like you have to pretend as a viewer that the people are actually on the run and they are sneaking behind a fence and that person who's carrying the very large camera behind them isn't there. Like, you have to forgive a little bit, but there's a point where you can't do that so much. And look, I'd much rather in a show see a team of law enforcement professionals who are using the tools at their disposal and explaining to the audience what it is that they can do, what they can't do, and why it is that they are or aren't doing it. That would actually be really compelling and interesting, because I enjoy being spoken to and not at. Now, look, Channel 10, this is pretty much par for the course for them. They are oversaturating it, as they do with pretty much every other series I've got. They had 3 episodes in 1 week. The first one running for 80 minutes plus ads. It's too much. Enough, Channel 10, enough. Just give us 1 episode. That's all I need. I'll come back every week for it. Not for this is garbage, but other things I'd come back. Survivor Australia, for example. So Hunted, incredibly interesting idea that lays flat on the screen as a lifeless chore annoyance to get through.
Yeah, look, I dipped into the last half hour, I think, of maybe the Monday night show. I can't remember exactly when it was. And I was immediately struck by how fake the technology room that all the pretend hunters sort of set themselves up in, and that we've got a hit on an ATM in Gympie. Let's all head to Gympie. And they phone, and then they walkie-talkie a guy who's in a car. Now, my thinking is, if they're really hurrying to get to these people, I hope they're not breaking speed limits or putting the general public at risk by trying to do this. Are we meant to assume that they're hurtling down country roads and hunting for the hunted? And I think it struck me as really stupid.
This is the thing as well. Like, I would actually be so much more engaged. So let's use the Gympie sort of suggestion as the way this is going to go. Think about the Gympie suggestion. They've got like someone who has used an ATM supposedly, and they're like, well, let's get someone out there. They do refer to the fact that they don't necessarily have people everywhere. They've got a couple of teams around the place. Yep. But if they legitimately said, look, we've got to get a team out there, we literally don't have a team that's around for like another 3 hours to drive there. That's really interesting, because what happens, you get the people to Gympie, but then you have to work in a certain a circle of like how far people could have traveled in that time and where they're going. And like the hunt begins anew, but it becomes a bit more focused. And how do you suddenly regroup? Because police do that when they're on a hunt for somebody. Like, they can't necessarily have people everywhere. And so they need to go where people are, pick up the clues from there, and then burrow down a bit further on them. Like, that's actually a really exciting thing to watch, but it's not in the show.
Not in this show at all. And I kept sort of referring back to the movie The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, and that line by Tommy Lee Jones, "I don't care." And I didn't care about this at all. This was stupid. Terrible television.
I wish someone as charismatic as Lieutenant Gerard in this, but
it would
not
be
there.
good. Also, so that's all over Channel 10 for the next little while, and then it'll become the butt of jokes for a while. Also in cinemas at the moment is a pretty terrific movie by all accounts. It's called Official Competition. This stars a veritable who's who of international cinema. Penelope Cruz plays a renowned filmmaker who's given a lot of money to mastermind a blockbuster film starring Hollywood heartthrob Antonio Banderas, and a chalk and cheese pairing with a theater actor called Ivan Torres, played by Oscar Martinez. This is apparently a fairly terrific sort of satirical takedown of films and film festivals and highbrow film culture. So this could be right up your alley, Dan Barrett. I'm keen to see this. I might duck out and see this tomorrow. Penelope Cruz is always worth watching. It's called Official Competition in limited release.
Yeah, look, this seems like something I'd probably press play on quite comfortably.
Yeah,
I won't go out to see it, but like when it comes to me, I do that for sure.
Yes. All righty, let's move on. We're done with the films and the TV shows.
Sorry, I was playing this thing then. He just kept on shouting. I'm going to play this thing again just to rub the salt in. Simon, in the middle of the podcast, we do a thing called the middle bit. That's where we are now.
Title, yeah. Middle bit.
Yeah, we spent a bit of money on the focus groups and did the market research, and they said the middle bit should be called the middle bit.
They're always worthwhile.
This week on the podcast, I was writing this article for my daily newsletter, which you can all subscribe to at alwaysbewatching.com. And it was talking about the nature of television in 2022 and how it was really quite different in 1959. And you'd think, obviously, it's quite different. Like it's been, 60 odd years. But what I was trying to get to was the idea that the TV Western was a huge genre in the late 50s and in cinemas as well. Westerns were really quite big.
Oh, of course, right? Yeah. And they were landmark TV shows. You rattle them off, the Gunsmokes and the Bonanzas and the Stagecoach.
1959 was probably the biggest. And I chose 1959 only because I knew Bonanza started that year. And I thought, well, it's as good a year as any to take a look at. But this is the TV schedules. And keep in mind, this is proper TV with broadcasts going out across just a couple of channels. It's not your 1,000-odd streaming services with way too many shows in each one. This is proper Western. So on 1959, you got the launch of Bonanza. Wow. The ABC network on Sunday nights, this was their schedule. This is just Sunday night, Simon. They used to play a show called Colt 45, Broken Arrow, Maverick, Lawman, The Rebel, and The Alaskans. Oh, wow. That's an entire night. And then on other channels that night, there was Riverboat, Overland Trail, and Lassie, which is also a rural set TV show.
That is an extraordinary amount of flyover state production dollars just right there. God, imagine what the industry would have been like.
Absolutely. And I wasn't just trying to talk about Westerns. I was trying to talk about this thing where when you turn on TV in the modern age, and this has been the case for the last 20, 30 years, it's a lot of TV that comes from the coast. So it's shows set in Los Angeles or New York or San Francisco or whatever. But back in the day, all the shows used to be in middle America. And then I thought, well, what other shows were there running in 1959 beyond Sunday nights? You got shows like Cheyenne, Tales of Wells Fargo, Sugarfoot, The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp, Bronco, The Rifleman, Wagon Train, Wichita Town, The Real McCoys, Johnny Ringo, Wrangler. And this is just on TV in 1959. And I haven't finished yet. Law of the Plainsman, Black Saddle, The Man from Black Hawk, Hotel de Paris, Wanted Dead or Alive, Have Gun Will Travel, great name, Gunsmoke, The Deputy, and the aforementioned Bonanza. That is a lot of middle American Western TV, all just isolated in this 1 year of TV programming.
That is an amazing, and I mean, I guess that would have come in the wake of Hollywood having big hits with their Western shows, and the fact that Westerns could be made relatively cheaply back in the day. I imagine they were all outdoor shoots, to have that as the backbone of your American television industry is an extraordinary thing. And we should point out that your Always Be Watching piece came on the back of one of the year's most watched films in Yellowstone being just ignored by the Emmy nomination. So,
So there was a comment about the fact that the reason Yellowstone got looked over is because it is a middle America program and doesn't reflect the values specifically of those on the coasts. Yeah. And so I feel there's something to that conversation because Yellowstone is effectively an island. Like there's an effort at the moment by all the networks to get the next Yellowstone. So the next couple of years, you are going to see a lot more like middle America set TV dramas. Okay. But like at the moment, it's kind of Yellowstone, and then the Yellowstone companion shows like 1883 are really the only things that are like Midwestern.
So you've got a genre that was once peaking, that was once the be all and end all of the American entertainment landscape, it fell out of favor, and we can't sort of ignore how much the Western did fall out of favor with audiences. Come the mid-'80s, you couldn't make a Western in Hollywood, and you couldn't at all until Dances with Wolves came along and changed, spun everything back. There'd be no Unforgiven without Dances with Wolves. They wouldn't get the money for it. So, so what used to be, and this is the premise of the middle bit, what used to be a high-profile genre in film or television that we don't see anymore.
Absolutely.
Is that sort of what we're looking at here?
That's exactly the premise of this.
You want to kick us off?
Oh, I mean, I just rattled off a whole bunch of Westerns, but look, here's the two that came to mind for me when I came up with this.
All right.
So the one that I would absolutely kill to see, and a genre that I think is actually maybe important and really actually upsets me that we don't see this very often at all, if ever, is movies about journalism and journalists.
Ah, my favorite. Yep. Okay, now we're talking. We're off on the right foot already, because these two are my favorites.
Yeah, so this is a good genre because it's kind of like a cop drama in that you got like an investigation that takes place usually in one form or another. And then you've also got like the sort of urgent sort of deadlines over the top, but it's also like it's life and death issues sometimes, but it's also got the remove where you don't have the people who are doing the investigation actually responsible for the incarceration of someone. Like it takes that element away from it. It's a pure investigation at play. And to me, that's a really fascinating, approach to take to storytelling. But what more, we're at an age at the moment where we're talking about disinformation and we're talking about a lack of trust in journalists broadly. I can't help but feel that a reason why there is such a lack of trust in journalists is because we don't actually see stories being reflected on screen of journalists doing journalism.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think the kind of journalistic stories that gave birth to accounts of journalism like All the President's Men or Reds, or I guess one of the most recent ones, and it wasn't that recent, it's 20 years old now, was the Kate Blanchett film Veronica Guerin. So these are those sort of journalists, and the outlets that those journalists have to contribute to and to write for, they've dried up, they've disappeared, and in the wake of, the Mango Mussolini for the last 4 years, he's gone a long way to discrediting what journalists do, and that makes a tough sell as a big screen movie.
But isn't there like an interesting story to be told about journalists who are working for one of these newspapers that's on the cusp of no longer making it? So journalists who are trying to do good journalism work, but are facing like resource shortages, really struggling with the plight of journalism in a modern moment. Like,
absolutely,
it's an area that's rife for drama, ignored consistently, but it doesn't have to be just like pure drama either. Like there's ways to do it from like a comedic standpoint. I think about one of my beloved shows from the 90s, a little show called Lois and Clark. Like, I mean, that's essentially what this is. Like, there's lots of opportunities to do journalism in different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be as deep and as gritty or like realistically textured in a way of something like All the President's Men. It could be something as light and frothy as a Lois and Clark. It could be The Paper, if you remember the Ron Howard from the early 90s. I think it's a 94 film. There's like the 1970s show Lou Grant, the spinoff from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Like, there's lots of opportunities to do journalism in really interesting different ways, but so rarely happens.
As good a film as it was, the one movie that quite sadly probably summed up the plight of the modern journalist in recent years might have been Bombshell, the Margot Robbie, Charlize Theron film that sort of took drew upon their experiences at Fox News. So there's angles to come at the journalistic story. That's a great example. Absolutely, there is.
In a way, though, Bombshell was probably more a story about media business than it was about journalism. But I mean, point taken.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to go again, or shall I?
I mean, one other one I was going to just sort of suggest, and this really speaks to, I guess, maybe just the changing nature of what we're after from the box office at the cinema, and it's kind of a bit hard to do on TV, but like the screwball romantic comedy.
Yes.
So I'm thinking about things which are maybe a little bit more in line with things like, His Girl Friday and that sort of comedy drama where it's lots of verbal pitter patter, and outside of like an Amy Sherman Palladino show, you just don't really get that on the screen much anymore. And there's something missing from it.
I think you're absolutely right. One of my favorite films, and this melds the world of TV journalism with the screwball comedy, is Switching Channels with Burt Reynolds and Kathleen Turner, a film from the late 80s, which is a Ted Kotcheff film, which is a very funny sort of spin on the that kind of comedy. So yeah, I think you're right. It's a tough genre to pull off. Some might say it's an old-fashioned genre and has just fallen out of favor because it can be pitched at such a high level. But when it's done right, the screwball romantic comedy, and there's a bit of foreword, there's a bit of sort of advanced word that the new George Clooney, Julia Roberts film, the name of which eludes me, but which was shot in Queensland, in which they play the parents of the girl getting married. Apparently there's a real screwball element to that as well. So there's maybe fingers crossed for that.
Because Clooney can absolutely do that sort of thing.
Sure. Yes, yeah. You can do it to make it look smart. All right. Well, I had a look at I sort of went down the avenue of TV genre, and I want to sort of start this by saying that subgenres and the nature of what's popular and what isn't is of course very cyclical, and some of these come around or pop up occasionally. But one genre that I found isn't as strong as it once was the sketch comedy show. And obviously Saturday Night Live aside, which has been a mainstay of television for years, but at its peak, audiences all over the world would settle in for things like Sonny and Cher or Rowan or The Laughing Show or The Carol Burnett Show. The UK had Monty Python and Not the 9 O'Clock News, and then Little Britain, and we had Fast Forward and The Big Gig. But those shows, other than the occasional sort of one that sticks its head up like a Key and Peele or a Dave Chappelle or something like that, the sketch comedy show seems to be a format that's fallen out of favor, certainly as a primetime gig. Would you agree?
I don't know, like this is like, I suddenly get what you're saying. It feels like there's less of them around, but also when I think about that as a genre, I can't help but feel about things like I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson. Like that's definitely one of the biggest TV shows the last couple of years and very firmly fits into what you're talking about. So I find it hard to think of this as a genre that's gone away entirely, but it's also a genre that isn't maybe, you know, it's not as prominent as it once was.
Exactly.
At the same time, like outside of the occasional sketch show, I don't really enjoy sketch all that much. So it's not a genre that I'm necessarily, you know, mourning the loss of.
I would say that prank shows like Candid Camera, they've been lost to the internet or YouTube or TikTok. So we don't see those.
There was an effort by, I can't remember like the production company or anything involved, but the young guy that played Dustin in Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Like after season 1 or 2 of that, like he was hosting one of those programs for Netflix.
Yeah, that's up on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it
also,
either.
There was a show that I don't think we really got here in Australia called Impractical Jokers.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a pretty big show in the US that ran for years and years on TBS, I think. So, I mean, that sort of thing is still around, but maybe we just don't really see it so much here down under.
The other one I sort of weighed in on, and this became a little bit of a nuanced argument, is I went with family dramas. And of course, family dramas are still around. You know, This Is Us has been huge and those sort of things. RIP. Yeah, RIP. But, you know, had a huge following. And then I sort of narrowed it down to patriarchal family dramas. So you don't see shows with titles like Father Knows Best anymore. That sort of morphed into, the format sort of morphed into things like 8 Is Enough or Family, where you have a broader sort of number of voices in the home. And then it sort of came into the much sort of bigger, broader ensemble piece like This Is Us, or like, heaven forbid I mention it, Modern Family. But there's those, that the family drama, maybe more than any other type of TV show, has gone through a lot of changes while still being central to many schedules.
I find it kind of awkward saying that that's a genre that's disappearing when the entire premise, the entire reason we're doing this segment is predicated on talking about Yellowstone, which is probably the biggest patriarchal family drama that's been on for years and years.
That's very true. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Also, another one that just comes to mind thinking about that as a genre is Outer Range, which was a Amazon series from a couple of months ago, starring Josh Brolin as the patriarch of the family, that has a very large black circumference type object in their backyard.
Yeah.
So definitely more a sci-fi show than a strict drama like you're talking about. But
I've got 2 more very quickly. The face and the format of children's television, especially the morning and afternoon shows. And yes, there's still Sesame Street and Play School from the good old days, but where are the Humphrey B. Bears? Where are the Fat Cats? Where are the
Winky Dinks?
The Winky Dinks? And where are the things like This Generation Shell's Neighborhood or Simon Townsend's Wonderworld? These seems to be very much anachronistic of their time, kind of programming that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the reason those shows don't exist anymore has got to do with broadcast licenses and requirements by networks. And, you know, there's reasons they used to get made and they just don't get it made anymore. And it's not from a lack of interest. I'm not sure the kids were really super that interested in those as formats generally. They were just kind of what's on.
finally, and this is an interesting one.
Can I go back to a genre you were talking about, being the family drama?
Yeah.
A subgenre that I really love dearly, and I actually meant to have this on my list and I forgot to put it down, it is a family drama, but it's the family drama where the family are moved from wherever they are, usually Los Angeles, like California kids or something, and get taken off to the other side of the world or to some sort of far off place. So they end up finding themselves in the jungles of Africa, or one of my favorite ones, the Birds of Paradise. They get transplanted from wherever they were in the mainland US to Hawaii and have to spend life there, get used to the culture and whatnot. And they're always fish out of water, and there's always like a bully around, and they struggle with that. And there's always, those interpersonal relationships. I love that genre.
That's a great genre. And that's, I mean, that opens up all sorts of location work and, getting the production into different parts of the world. So yeah, that sounds very sweet. Now I'm going to go right back to the dawn of television here, back to that time that you were talking about when Westerns ruled. Also high on a lot of those schedules was the live TV broadcast. Back when there were shows, did these sort of standalone theatrical style productions with names like Texaco Star Theatre and Fireside Theatre and General Electric Theatre. This was in the 50s, and it was when actors were being drawn to television from the stage, from Broadway, and doing live TV broadcasts. This gave birth to sort of talents like Sidney Lumet, the great director. He sort of came out of that time. Alan Pakula, who did the aforementioned All the President's Men. And yes, there's been some live TV sort of gimmicky style bits. I know ER did one and The West Wing did one, and I think some sitcoms in recent years have done live TV shows. But the actual
Drew Carey show was inspired by the ER.
Which one?
The Drew Carey show did a couple of live episodes.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. So back in the day, they were staple parts of the weekly television schedule. So I don't know, maybe it'd be interesting to see that back again. But they've completely disappeared.
Yeah, well, I mean, live TV generally has disappeared, and I don't understand that, because you'd kind of think that at the moment they're looking for a way to differentiate themselves from streamers and other types of media. Like, surely the way to really say that we are doing something very different is it's a pure live experience. Yeah, but it doesn't happen. I don't understand why.
Did the that gimmicky thing that Black Mirror did and Netflix tried to do with that cartoon series, whatever that was called, where you press on the button, that interactive experience was kind of that, but not really.
Not really. I mean, also it wasn't live. Like with live, there's a danger anything could go wrong.
Yeah.
And you just, like, I don't understand why it isn't something they lean on a lot more frequently than they do.
I remember what a big deal the live ER episode was. I remember when that was broadcast.
Yeah, so look, I mean, I was talking a little while ago about home shopping networks. One of the reasons why I think they work because they're trying to sell things in a real-time environment. But also, I think the reason why they're so engaging for a lot of people to watch is that they are purely off-the-cuff live television where you're watching someone in real time talking to you, which I don't think you can deny. That's actually really powerful. Absolutely. I think it's interesting this week as well. We've got the 30th anniversary of the Australian Late Show. Not to be confused with the David Letterman Late Show, but the one with the D generation, with your Tony Martins, your Mick Malloys, your Snatto Gattos.
Rob Sitch and who were they? That was the team. Yeah, they were a good team. They were,
Tommy G at the news desk.
Great sketch comedy. There you go. There's another one.
A live TV program that used to go out at 10 o'clock every Saturday night.
The Big Gig. That was it. That was another one too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. That's one of our better middle bits. I really enjoyed talking about that. Hope you enjoyed it too, screen watching listeners.
Oh, I should play a sting now, shouldn't I? See, this is the danger of live. Okay, Simon, it's the end of the podcast where usually we talk about, wait a sec, we're not going to talk about what we usually talk about. We've shifted up the format. Simon,
we had a production meeting of sorts, didn't we? That's exciting. We sort of looked at the format. We thought, what's working, what's not. We can't get rid of Dan entirely, so we've kept him. But what we've done is we've moved some of the bits around, and hopefully this will provide a far more intimate and engaging podcasting experience.
Oh, let me pull this dagger out of my back. Simon Foster, we are ending the podcast with something we used to do much earlier in the podcast with what else have you been watching? So, Simon, I'm going to throw it to you. Apparently, sorry, I just read what you've been watching. Simon, what have you been watching?
Well, I've had people all around me for a number of years say you've got to watch The Orville. Now, my general sort of hatred of all things Seth MacFarlane, I should say, has kept me away from doing that. But I was sitting in front of the television this week and just wanted something noisy on. So I put the Orville on, and before I knew it, and right from episode 1, season 1 I did, and before I knew it, I'm clocking over episode 6 of a kind of an Orville binge. And I just found it really very engaging. I found him quite likable in the lead. There are some moments where he can't hide away his smutty, sort of semi-misogynistic kind of comedy, but the characters that he surrounds himself with, the simply structured but really engaging stories that he tells reminded me of that first sort of season of Star Trek, the original series. And I thought it was a beautiful looking show. I think the ship design and the production design of the set was really cool. And so maybe I'm late to the game, but I actually found the Orville to be really, really interesting and can understand why it's got a really passionate following. Still can't understand why they'd ever bothered to do a podcast about it. It must have been the most obnoxious half hour of podcasting.
Simon.
Now, I should point out by saying that our good friend Dan Barrett did run a podcast on the Orville, and all those things I say about it, very little of that was true. Apparently, it's quite a good listen. It's called Orville Land, and I think it's still around to listen to, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe. Look, so I mean, the thing with Orville Land, the podcast about the Orville, was this podcast that was being produced out of SBS, who they've got the broadcast rights to the Orville in Australia. So for, the second season of that show, and then I think we did some extra episodes here and there, it felt like a really long time we were doing it. It may have only been 3 or 4 months, who knows? But anyway, we did a podcast around the Orville, and we talked about, what happened in episodes, behind the scenes stuff, references, allusions, ideas raised in the show and exploring them a bit further, that sort of thing. So we did a very SBS take on the Orville. And I have to say, I wasn't that big a fan of the Orville going into the show. And as I left the show, still not really that into it. So there's elements that I like about it, but I think that the thing I can never really get past with the Orville was that I don't understand why you make a show which is basically just a blatant Star Trek Next Generation, Voyager era knockoff without really bringing anything extra to it. There's no, it's not a satirical take on that. It's not really anything other than them doing a bit of a lighthearted version.
Lightheartedness, I think, I think lightheartedness is the key there. It does have quips.
Where the show works is when they start doing a Star Trek version where the characters are actually really human, with very human reactions to things, and actually, you can imagine someone on the Orville, breaking wind inadvertently, and that becomes a storyline. It is to that very earthy kind of thing that can take place on that show. And I quite like it for that. People have actual genuine human reactions to stuff. But outside of that, the show just didn't really do anything that was fresh enough for me to really latch onto.
I thought the setup where he had to work with his ex-wife who had an affair was kind of very sort of plot driven, but they worked that into they kind of worked that into the character. That was more for MacFarlane and his quips at women, which part of what he does and which I hate. But he also gave voice to her, Adrienne Palicki, as the ex-wife and his second in charge, and also to the young actress who plays I want to say not Sarlacc, but the other young sort of crew member with super strength. Very good as well. So yeah,
don't get too attached to her.
I'm already attached. All right, okay. So I'm kind of on board. It's good. Light entertainment viewing for me while the world stresses bear down upon my shoulders. So yeah, that was the Orville for me. So I've caught up, kids. There you go. I'm one of the cool kids now. I've watched the Orville.
Not terrible TV. I think I've just got more of a personal stake in it because, Yeah,
I'm looking at your photo here that you had taken with one Sid Sharma and Shelley Peacock during the Orville Land days. Somehow you look older then than you do now. I don't get it, but it was 2018. Oh, let me read the description. Join Dan, Shelley, and Sid every week to chat about the sci-fi comedy The Orville. Watch the show every Friday on SBS. Well, not anymore. Ridiculously fun chat about that week's episodes. Did you write that? I bet you wrote that, didn't you?
Yeah, I probably did.
Yeah, I bet you did.
That was probably we need a blow, quick Dan, and then I just belted something out.
All right. So what else have you been watching, my friend?
Okay, so I've been watching a couple of things. So I mentioned earlier watching Mad Men. So I don't talked about that.
Yep.
But I have to say, going back watching the first episode of Mad Men, I was really just sort of surprised at just how young everybody looked. And also, when you watch that first episode of Mad Men, this is a TV pilot, which everyone talks about as being one of the all-time great TV pilots. Okay, it really is a very well-constructed hour of TV. And lays everything in there, but also it like lays everything in there really thick. Like all the misogyny is really super heightened compared to what you get in later episodes of the show. Like the messaging's all still in there, but like it's so overt. All the sexism incredibly overt. Like everything is just smacking you across the face with it, which really surprised me a little bit because that is a show which does subtlety so beautifully, except when it doesn't, and it makes a real point of not being subtle. But like this is like the entire hour is in no way subtle whatsoever.
What year? When did it first drop? 2013, I guess?
2007.
Oh, 2007, that long ago.
You haven't watched it, have you?
I saw chunks of the first series, but no, not long term. No.
Okay. Yeah, you should go back and give it a go.
Yeah, I probably will.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to get through the Orville.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely prioritize the Orville over one of the greatest TV shows ever made. Yeah, definitely do that, Simon. What else I've been watching? I was doing a Good Wife rewatch, and so we concluded that during the week. So on Monday night, we watched the final episode of it, and I have to say, like I've watched it through like when it first aired, and then I think I've done a second rewatch, but I found it just be generally a pleasurable experience going through this most recent watch of it, only because I think I got to see the construction of the show just a little bit better, and it's a much smarter show in terms of its overall construction than I think I've really given it credit for in the past.
Who are those showrunners that we love? So
that would be Robert and Michelle King,
who did Brain Dead.
Yeah.
So
Brain
we're
Dead.
fans.
Evil, which is a show that you should watch, Simon, because that is absolutely your bag.
Yes, I know. You mention it every week on the podcast, and I keep trying to stop him mentioning it, listeners, but he keeps mentioning it.
Instead, you just keep watching The Orville.
I've got 4 more seasons to get through.
Let me just pull this dagger out of my back again. How does it keep getting in there? But the other thing I've been watching this week was The Rehearsal, which is the new show from Nathan Fielder, the Nathan For You guy. And so the premise of this, it's a show which, like, it's an unscripted program-ish. And basically it's Nathan Fielder. He has, every week he talks to somebody who has a life problem. So in the first one, it's this guy who was doing pub trivia with some friends. He didn't really know them particularly that well. He just kind of fell into like this pub trivia group. And every week he'd turn up, but like really early in his relationship with them, he made some reference about him doing a master's degree, or that he has a master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the couple of years that have followed, like they've all just kept on playing trivia and gotten to know each other reasonably well. And so they'll do things like, oh, there's an interesting job you should apply for. And it's always something we need a master's degree to be able to do that job. So he keeps on accepting it, and he kind of feels really guilty because they've got this perception of him as having like sort of greater academic sort of, foundation to his life than he has. But he's never really quite known how to come to the table and say this to him because it feels like a betrayal. And he thinks about this sort of thing very much because he's a very sort of, introspective person and doesn't really make friends easily. So I think he really values this life, experiences on with this pub trivia team. So the premise of it is that Nathan Fielder has come across this guy, and this guy wants to confess to his trivia team, our relationship is kind of a lie based off this. And he's been thinking it through and he just can't bring himself to do it. So Nathan Fielder creates a scenario whereby he's able to rehearse his speech that he wants to give to one of his pub trivia friends to, break the ice and get this happening. And so the idea is that if you rehearse it once or twice or 3 times, you can start going out and gaming all the various scenarios and how people are going to react and how you react to them. So you're going to have a perfect experience that really speaks to the strength of what you're the strength of your problem and the eventual solution of it. And so over the course of an hour, you see them game everything out. They build large, elaborate sets. They have a very large cast of characters who come in and out. And you start looking at like the tree that they build out of possible scenarios. And it's a really fascinating, interesting show. The thing that surprised me about it, Simon, not funny.
No, so, not funny.
You've seen it, haven't you?
I've seen this episode, yes. Not funny.
So Nathan For You, quite uncomfortable. Very funny program. Like it's a funny program. It's uncomfortable funny, but this is just uncomfortable.
Very. It also, for me, brings into question, and I find this one of the show's assets. This isn't a takedown of it at all, but I started to wonder how much the con was on us. I started to wonder if this is all a construct in the form of a TV show, and if this guy who's uncomfortable about lying that he's got a master's isn't also an actor who's brought on board to entertain us and to be part of a completely fictional TV show, which would blow me away if it did, because I think that's a great idea. But it wouldn't surprise me at all, because I got the feeling that Fielder would take the extent of his facade into our homes, into our lives.
Yeah, there's something at play here, which I
Yeah.
don't know that I've actually tipped their cards just yet on it.
Yeah, that's the feeling I'm getting.
Yeah.
And look, I found it really interesting. I found him an awkward but engaging and quite a really smart individual. It's certainly a unique show, not like anything I've ever seen before. And I'm keen to see what he does with other. Have you watched any more of the episodes?
I've only seen the first one, so I'm watching it as it goes out. Like I've got access to some future episodes, I just haven't. But what I think I liked about it was that it is so awkward. I didn't really enjoy watching the program. Okay, but I've been thinking about the program a lot since then, which I think really speaks quite a lot to it. And when I was complaining earlier about the show Hunted Australia, like essentially it's just doing things that I think the rehearsal really deliver, which is genuinely human experiences. So without saying too much, there is something that Nathan does to the guy in this that he ends up revealing it at the end because, you know, he wants to be honest about it in the same way that this guy was honest with his trivia team. And when he reveals it, like it actually cuts this guy really badly. And he has a very honest reaction to it. And that was really incredible, powerful TV.
It really was, yeah. That final moment.
It's so rare we get something that's that real, raw, and honest.
I did laugh a little bit when the cop said, "I regret the day that the Chinese ever invented gunpowder." I thought that was, I thought that was very funny. So it did have a few giggles in it for me. Yeah, it's called The Rehearsal. It's on binge at the moment, and it's we can't guarantee you'll like it, but I think we can guarantee it's not like anything you've seen before.
Now, in our rundown, I also mentioned I was watching a mystery title.
Yes,
I don't remember what that was. If you can tell me what it was, that would be fantastic.
Jeez, you and your rundown little inserts. Oh, on Tuesday, I thought of a mystery title. Come this time of the week, can't think of what it was. All right, well, we can do an add-on podcast if you come up with your mystery title. In another change to the format, we've dropped the special event screenings and gone with the much catchier Save the Date, where we look at dates into the future, maybe in the near future, maybe in the distant future. Woo! And you can mark in your calendar as being fairly important. Let's lead off with the Korean Film Festival, which kicks off the Sydney leg of its 2022 season on August 18, 2022. And then that'll roll out across the country with events in Brisbane and Melbourne and Adelaide as well. But August 18 here in Sydney for the Korean Film Festival.
I would be really fascinated to talk to people who are like behind the film festival and find out if they're seeing attendance increase like a lot over like the last 2 to 3 years. Because I'm sure this isn't the first year of that film festival.
No, not at all.
But like,
you mean specifically Korean attendance or just film festivals in general?
No, for the Korean Film Festival, because there's such an awareness of Korean cinema at the moment, particularly South Korean, obviously. But yeah,
and they very much lean into very contemporary Korean cinemas. They have retrospective and stuff like that, but this is straight from the cinemas of Korea to you. So yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, only because there's just so much like, Korean dramas that you find on your streaming services and whatnot. Yeah. But maybe people are oversaturated with the Korean stuff they're able to access so readily that maybe it works counter. Anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah. You want to do this one? This was your one. I got this off your newsletter, so really you should do this.
Yeah. Oh boy, I want to do this one. September 19, 2022, Quantum Leap, the reboot. It's going to debut on NBC in the US. And so far, we don't have an Australian broadcaster. If I was going to guess, I'd say probably Stan, but we'll see how that goes. And I might drop those guys an email and let them know that I want to see it.
During the week, a poster dropped for Christopher Nolan's next film. It's called Oppenheimer. It stars Cillian Murphy as the man who invented the nuclear bomb, or whose technology, nuclear research led to the nuclear bomb. What
was his name?
It was Oppenheimer. It's right there in the title. A teaser is going to screen ahead of note, but put this one in the diary, kids. July 23, 2023 is when we'll see Oppenheimer from Christopher Nolan.
That's like a year away, Simon.
Yeah. So you've got to get next year's diary to put that in your calendar. So get out
God. Okay, so save the date for later this year where you buy your new calendar and then
to mark in the next Christopher Nolan film, July 23. Let's continue with the dates. This date stuff is fun. You can never have enough dates.
No, that's exactly it. July 24, 1998, we saw the debut in cinemas of Saving Private Ryan. It was a little film directed by one Steven with a V Spielberg, and it starred young ingenue Tom Hanks, Edward Burns, as discussed at length last week, and Matt Damon, and that film was released.
On July 25, 1985, a spokeswoman for Rock Hudson confirmed he had AIDS. This was a real turning point in the fight against AIDS in America. It made it front page news and sort of forced the then president Ronald Reagan to finally take some action after not taking action for a long time. So the announcement of Rock Hudson's AIDS infection was a landmark moment in the fight against that terrible disease.
Now, while you started that, I was building up my self-confidence to be able to do an impersonation here. But then I just realized I was going to embarrass myself almost as much as Paul Rubens did on July 26, 1991, when he was arrested in Florida for exposing himself at an adult movie theater. That's what I was to do. And I think I would have done it, but then you talked for too long. And thankfully, I didn't embarrass myself.
I took over the embarrassment. On July 27, 1940, let's go way back to the day we said hello for the first time to one Bugs Bunny, created by Tex Avery and Bob Givens. He's our cartoon Wild Hair, debuted on July 27, 1940.
No, not happy birthday. No, not that. Please, no, not happy birthday.
July 24, 1969, Jennifer Affleck was born. She was the star of films like Selena, Anaconda, Out of Sight, and Hustlers. One of those movies is really quite good.
Yeah, Anaconda is a great film. July 24, 1979, the beautiful and talented Rose Byrne, star of Damages, Bridesmaids, and Physical. She was born. Love Rose.
July 26, 1972, SNL's Maya Rudolph, also the star of Bridesmaids and Loot, reviewed on this here very podcast just weeks ago. She was born.
And for the first time in the birthday segments, the lovely Hannah Waddington from Ted Lasso and Game of Thrones. She was born on July 28, 1974.
Okay, folks, this is the end of the podcast. I think we're only into the third hour of the show at this point.
Yeah, that was quite a good one. I think I'll listen to that later. It was very good. You said some interesting things.
Yeah. Look, folks, thanks so much for listening to Screen Watching. My name is Dan Barrett. You should find me on Twitter if that's your thing. You can find that at the Dan Barrett. You can also start your day with my free newsletter. It's called Always Be Watching. Find that at alwaysbewatching.com. What's the newsletter about? It's about 600 words. Also, you can find it at it's got the big stories in TV, streaming, and film. And then you've got Fridays, where I drop the Always Be Streaming newsletter, which recounts the big shows that launched that very week. Simon Foster, I haven't written that newsletter yet.
Oh boy, you've got a big weekend ahead of you. Big few hours ahead of you, haven't you? What are you going to talk? What are you going to write about?
Oh no! Okay, it's fine. It's going to be okay.
I'm on the Twitter at Simon R. Foster1. I'm on the web at screen-space.net. Go to the Screen Watching Facebook page at Screen Watching Podcast, and do check out our YouTube channel, the Screen Watching YouTube channel. There's an interview up there I did with a lady called Catherine Hill. She's the director of the Australian film Some Happy Day, which is a dramatized account of the plight of the homeless in Australia. It's a terrific film, and she says some really interesting things about what it took to get this movie made and the production of it. So that's on our YouTube channel.
Now, look, real talk audience member, you're a happening hit person. You're an influencer.
You still talking
to
me?
Get out there. No, not audience members, not you, Simon.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But look, if you're one of these people that influence the world, like follow Screen Watching on your favorite podcast app, load it up now, hit the follow button, tell your friends. That's where your influence really pays off.
Yeah, it's true. And if you watch the YouTube channel, you'll see us and realize that we could influence fashion. We could change the way haircuts sort of make their way into pop culture.
Hey, Simon, that's a really cool black hoodie you've got on.
It is a hoodie. I know. How did you know that? Can you actually see that? It is a hoodie.
Yeah. Sorry, this is the part where you like also a little bit of a compliment.
Yeah. That's a good black hoodie that you've got on as well. Are we actually dressing the same now? We've been doing this podcast too long. Look at us. Oh, this is going to be great for the podcast, for the YouTube channel.
Okay, so I'm just going to bring my black hood over the top now as I do my Darth Sidious. And
yeah. We look like those Spanish monks, don't we?
Simon Foster, the force has been strong with this one. We'll be back next week.